Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. My name is Alberto Ortega Trejo, and I am the program manager of the Katz Center for Mexican Studies at the University of Chicago. Today, we have the pleasure of having with us Catalina Lozano, Mariana Castillo Deball, and Santiago Borja, part of the team that was responsible to represent Mexico in the 59th Venice Biennial in 2022. Catalina Lozano is currently chief curator at Arte Museo and Vitoria-Gasteiz and researcher based in Spain. For the past 10 years, she has been interested in minor narratives that question hegemonic forms of knowledge, the analysis of colonial narratives, as well as the deconstruction of the modern division between nature and culture, and how they have acted as departure points for many of her recent and future curatorial and editorial projects, including exhibitions such as Natural History of Ruins at Pivo in Sao Paulo, and The Willow Sees the Heron's Image Upside Down in Tenerife, amongst others. Mariana Castillo Deball earned a BFA from the Universidad Nacional Autónoma de México in 1997. In 2003, she completed a postgraduate program at Jan van Eyck Academy in the Netherlands. Mariana Castillo Deball has been awarded the Prix de Rome in 2004, the Zurich Art Prize in 2012, and we are welcoming also Mauricio Marcin right now. Anyway, Mariana was an artist in residency at the Berliner Künstler program in Deutsche Akademische, like the DAF Berlin. Castillo Deball takes a kaleidoscopic approach to her practice, mediating between science, archaeology, and the visual arts, and exploring the way in which disciplines describe the world. Her installations, performances, sculptures, and editorial projects arise from the recombination of different languages that seek to understand the role of objects play in our identity and history. Santiago Borja interweaves relevant elements of diverse cultural heritages. That is, different ways of conceiving the world. He achieves a series of juxtapositions that equally touch both the tangible and intangible cultural heritage. Thus, through what he calls anachronistic montages, he seeks to make evident the complexity with which our cultural values are articulated, and that, for the sake of the construction of concrete identities, most of the time they are reduced and simplified to a single, permanent, and unequivocal thing. We are also joined by Mauricio Marcin. Mauricio Marcin is a chief curator at Museo de Arte Carrillo Gil since 2019. In 2015, he co-founded Aeromoto, a public library based in Mexico City. His curatorial research tries to make visible the neo-avant-garde and non-objectual practices developed in Mexican art during the second half of the 20th century. His work is based on an archival practices, and simultaneously, his historical research has been linked to the practices of young generations in diverse ways. That offers a rhizomatic perspective of Mexican art in recent decades. Today, they will share with us the work that they did. Oh, and I just saw Naomi Rincón Gallardo. I will introduce her as well. Naomi Rincón Gallardo is a visual artist who lives and works in Oaxaca, Mexico. From the colonial feminist and queer perspective, her audiovisual and performative work creates narratives of desire, dissidence, and resilience in the face of contemporary processes of dispossession, heteropatriarchal violence, in colonial contexts. Naomi Rincón Gallardo integrates into her mythical political practice her interests in speculative fiction, music videos, theatrical games, vernacular celebrations, and the manual elaboration of props and costumes. She's currently, she holds a PhD from practice program at the Academy of Fine Arts Vienna. And today they are joining us to share with us their work representing Mexico at the Venice Biennial. And thank you so much for being here. And I will pass the microphone to whoever wants to speak first.
Mau, ¿quieres empezar tú? Should I? Okay. So hello, everyone, and thank you for listening. So as Alberto said, I'm Catalina Lozano, and with Mauricio, I co-curated the Mexican Pavilion in this year's Venice Biennale. It was the first time Mauricio and I collaborated, and the collaboration came about because in the process of preparing a project for the pavilion, we realized we were working along the same lines and we were interested in sort of the same topics, to call it something. And one of those topics, I think, was kind of exploring the complexity of what we today call Mexico as a nation state, and acknowledging that let's say geopolitical configuration is let's say containing a lot of ways of or forms of life and ways of living and forms of knowledge that are at odds with the very foundation of the nation state. And we were interested in kind of acknowledging that those tensions that are inherent to the sort of national Mexican project, and sort of giving a space for those discussions. And I think in that let's say line of thought, we were interested in different kind of threads. For me, for instance, the notion or the issue of technology was important in terms of kind of problematizing what technology is and what it does. And I think in one way or another, all the artists that participated in the pavilion, Santiago, Mariana, Naomi, and Fernando Palma, who is not here today, explore technology in one way or another. But also, I think it was also an opportunity to kind of engage with very contemporary issues and problems. And I think the work of Naomi and of Fernando were like kind of maybe delving into the extractivist economy that is kind of plaguing Mexico today, and how it's counteracted through kind of different forms of resistance. In the case of Mariana, I think it's a continuation of a long-standing research on different forms of representation that converge in historical documents, and kind of analyzing and deconstructing those analyses to kind of understand where these images come from, what they stand for, and how they live in, like how they can be actualized today. And in the case of Santiago, I think it was like a big effort to engage with something. It's like what Marisol de la Cadena would say, is like trying to enter a dialogue with something one doesn't fully comprehend or understand, and acknowledging that gap in understanding, and kind of doing something from that place, so that it's an uncomfortable and I think brave place to work from. But I don't know, maybe Mauricio can pick up from here. And is he still here? I can't see him.
I think he lost the connection.
Yeah, maybe. Okay, so anyways, let's say the process of building up the pavilion started from those broad ideas and bringing these very different practices together. I think if something, the pavilion is characterized by a lot of, let's say, diversity in ways of working, ways of producing, but also this sense that we wanted to do something that was very collective, because let's say the Mexican Ministry of Culture asked for a group show. They didn't want a solo presentation in the Mexican Pavilion, and we kind of took that as as a principle to work through the different aspects of the pavilion. So there are 4 artists, 2 curators, 2 designers working on the book. So everything is kind of done in collaboration. And I think in the end, the actual pavilion was very much like a overlapping of all these different projects, in one way because we had little space and a lot of work, but also I think in a way it worked as a good translation, like translation in space of what the pavilion was trying to do, which was kind of showing that complexity and that difficulty to come up with kind of clear-cut definition of what contemporary Mexico is. So when just the day of the opening of the biennial, we were featured in the New York Times, and the article, the journalist was quite thorough. He interviewed everyone. He was very, he was very professional in the way he reported the pavilion. But the article was titled "Attacking Mexico with Mexico's Approval," and I was a bit shocked with that, let's say, headline, because we weren't really attacking Mexico. But I guess the verb I would have used is challenging the notion of Mexico with Mexico's approval, because it's true that we got full support from the Ministry of Culture to this pavilion that, in a way, I think is challenging a little bit these very fundamental notions. Sorry, I think, okay. So maybe I think one of you can talk about your work or the pavilion in general, and maybe I can look for images so we can show.
Cata, I have the images already here, so I'm gonna make a slideshow.
Thank you, Santiago.
But
I don't know, Mariana, do you want to
Naomi can start with them.
Yeah.
Do you see the images?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do I start?
Mm-hmm.
How brief shall I be, or how much time do I have? Because I don't know. Well, I will just describe briefly what I did. And what I did was, well, it's a project that is called Sonnet of Vermin. And the video, which is a video installation that has a video projection along with some sculptural props. And in Sonnet of Vermin, there's I imagined a gang of unwanted creatures related to the Mesoamerican underworld, who are attempting to synchronize each other through radio antennas. And they are trying to seek for a sort of subaltern solidarity and queer relationality as a form of resistance and reexistence among the ruins of a landscape that has been threatened and expolied and devastated by extractivist projects. And it somehow continues or connects to a topic that I've been working for some time now, which is the project of trying to embrace creatures who are somehow designing obstacles for progress, or designing obstacles for development, or who become themselves the obstacle, meaning those who are considered backwarded, inferior, useless, underdeveloped, deviated, unwanted, unproductive, superstitious, unclean, or disposable, or even killable. And I take this trope of alimaña, vermin, which is, at least in Spanish, it's a word that refers to different creatures that have a common element, that is, they are unwanted. They are unwanted. They have to be killable. You have to get rid of them. So I just imagine these creatures trying to reclaim for pleasure, reclaim for collectivity. And I've been calling these world making processes underworld makings, because they try to acknowledge the intimacy with death as a constitutive element of, or a constitutive condition of life when it's facing various degrees and intensified degrees of dispossession, the precarization of conditions that sustain our lives, the militarization and paramilitarization of the country, etc. And this is a process that we've been witnessing, a process that has been expanded and intensified for more than 15 years now. So yes, so the work depicts these creatures, which are a gang of paranormal amphibian children who have learned how to metabolize toxins and who are claiming for another fix of pesticide. There's a scorpion, and the scorpion in Mesoamerican cosmology is connected to sexual transgression. There's also a funerary bundle that somehow refers to a funerary practice from the mystic area that was to, wrap up a body before it descends, let's say, to the world of the dead. Then there is a bat, which is also a creature that is connected to the underworld in Mesoamerican cosmologies. And I say Mesoamerican, taking it from Mexican anthropologist Lopez Austin, who talks about this hardcore of different Mesoamerican groups, like that, even if they are very different and very diverse, there are certain elements that are repeated in different cultures. And the bat is usually connected to the world of the dead, and it's a nocturnal creature. But I was also interested in the bat because it's a cross-pollinization, I don't know how to say that in English, cross-pollinizador, cross-pollinizing creature, it interconnects different species. So there's also this desire to create different living entanglements with other creatures as a sort of entangled interspecies solidarity. And finally, there's also a snake. And the snake represents somehow the possibility for transformation, as for its has the capacity to change her skin. And so it announces the renewal of the cycles. And there are also other characters who are body parts without the body. Specifically, they are arms, and they are arms that are refusing to be buried. They are trying to come up. They come up constantly as a way as reminders that there were stories that were interrupted unjustly. And these stories that have been interrupted unjustly are also synchronizing this cyborgian funerary bundle that it's sending radio signals to the other creatures. So of course the structure is a bit surrealist. I'm pretty much interested in surrealism, but as a political mythical surrealism. And well, I think that's pretty much it. Thank you. Well, perhaps I can say that I find various connections with the works of the other artists that are in the pavilion. I think we somehow share the interest to embrace or to address a critique on modernity, and also to try to work with knowledges that have been historically suppressed or stigmatized or forgotten or put into shelves of museums, and try to depart from there in order to create different versions for imagining also other futurities that are based on the co-presence on different temporalities, different scales, different life forms. Thank you.
Okay. So Mariana, would you like to? And if you want me to stop in one image, just let me know, please. Maybe
no, I think it's okay if you do
Okay.
If you do the random slideshow.
Okay.
And then now people need to guess who made what.
Exactly. Well, I guess I can already know about this one, but anyway.
Yeah. Well, as Naomi said, I also find that, I mean, even if we never worked before as a group of artists, and the process was also very quick, we needed to take decisions very fast. And at the same time, like everybody was like working on their own projects independently. So it was quite a surprise when we arrived to the space and everything started to emerge. So at the beginning, they installed Fernando's piece, which is coming from the ceiling to the ground. He installed this wooden structure on the roof that it's the symbol of a colibri and a coyote. Is it that? I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to talk about Fernando's work, but I just want to say that there was this complex way in how the architecture of the space was built. So first there were these elements coming from the top to the bottom. Also when Santiago started to install his textiles, but everything had somehow a connection with the sky and with the ground in a very natural way. So beyond the metaphor, it was an interesting way to approach the space of the exhibition that I think it never happened in a Mexican pavilion before. And well, the work that I developed for the exhibition was a pavement, a wooden pavement that it's engraved in the same way that engravings were done since the beginning of printing, or even before industrial printing, like just manual printing techniques. And the drawings have different sources. So the title of the piece is Calendar Fall Away. So the main element in the center of the space is a snake that contains a calendar. But this snake is not totally round, or it cannot contain time anymore. It kind of opens up, and all the symbols and all the signs of time, which also come from a Mesoamerican calendar, in the same way that Naomi described it, or from the same kind of complex amalgam of cultures. All these symbols are kind of falling apart. And there are other scenes that occur in this pavement. There are some references to some Italian ceiling paintings, but it's on the floor. So again, the sky is kind of falling on the ground. And there are also some autobiographical elements that have to do with my own speciality and with my own personal history, with the different places where I have been growing up and how these spaces have transformed also my own life. And this also, the image you see now is, this pavement was also used as a printing matrix. So these are actually prints that were done directly from the floor plates into paper. And they were afterwards framed and installed against the walls of the pavilion. And well, it's also important to say that people could walk on it. This exhibition had many, many visitors, and the entrance to the pavilion, it's an outdoor area. So there was a lot of sand and dirt. And so there was also like a extra transformation of the space itself. So I think by the end of the exhibition, which was just a couple of days ago or a week ago, it looked almost sanded. So I quite enjoyed that there was like an extra layer that was added to the piece by the fact that people were actually walking on it for months. Yeah, I think that's all that I have to say about the work at the moment. And I give the word to Santiago.
Okay, thank you very much, Mariana. I'm going to stop the slideshow because I can concentrate talking and pushing the button at the same time. Well, first of all, I would like to say that, yeah, this was a great experience. And even though we didn't knew each other beforehand, well, I knew Catalina and Mauricio a little bit, but not the rest of the artists. I think was a fantastic experience, and we managed to build something together, and that was quite surprising because everything was done very quickly. The decision was made very quickly, and then there's a lot of pressure to try to finish the project. No, for me, it was also a very special challenge because we decided to do something new. I decided to work with people I haven't met before, from a community in the southern border of Mexico, in Chiapas, in the mountains. I always been very interested in textiles, but I actually haven't worked with this group beforehand. So, so I approached this association called El Camino de los Altos. That is a very interesting association made of, composed by 140 women from all the different villages in the Altos de Chiapas. And so they work together, and they have managed to build like a structure that allows them to earn their living through the textiles. Well, regarding the piece I developed here for the exhibition, it's called Talel. Talel is a Tzotzil word that means, well, I was drawn into that word because it's kind of ambiguous. When you translate the meaning to Spanish, it kind of seems a little bit contradictory in a certain way, because in the one hand means personality, like your own personality, but on the other hand means tradition as well. So it's like the two things. We tend to, in the Western world, we tend to think that personality is something very individual, that it just your personality, and that's something that belongs to you and to anybody else. But in Tzotzil is both things, because actually your personality is shared with other beings. So talking about yourself, you have to talk about other beings at the same time, and that's very interesting. And then you have tradition. The tradition is a way of living, a way of doing that is already settled, and it just kind of manifests through you. So that's why I chose this word, because I found the whole concept fascinating. And what I tried to do here was to make like an analogy between genetics and tradition, cultural tradition, because it seems to me like most of the people that, I mean, when you see like traditional textiles, people don't tend to see the persons. They tend to see just like the material, they like it or not, or whatever. But it's like these kind of things are done by themselves, like as if there weren't anybody behind those textiles trying to express themselves. And at the same time, if we kind of compare genetics and tradition, it's like if something is already settled and there's nothing else you can do about it. Like that's the way it is, because that's the things that you have inherited in a biological way or in a cultural way. So now with the introduction of epigenetics, that is like this new concept, where we have learned that even in the genetic code, there are changes. I mean, there are new things that can change the code. It's not settled forever. I found that quite interesting, and I try to relate it to the textiles through the fact that these people that weave the project, of course, they modify every time they weave. They modify tradition, even though it sometimes it's kind of subtle. But of course, there are elements that that change the code. So for the piece, what I tried to do was to replicate the representation of the human genome with textiles, and then through the work with 11 women from this community of Bautista Chico in Chamula, Chiapas, I asked them if they could change the code in their own personal way. I mean, introducing different kind of elements from their ordinary lives, like vegetables or plants, or even the way of the the textile was done, they changed the stitching, they changed the warp and the theft and whatever they could find just to express something different, but having a very solid and very robust, let's say, structure. And so in very subtle ways, all these personal traits came to the surface. And so in very broad terms, I think that was what we tried to achieve here with this piece. And I don't know. So looking and thinking about the whole exhibition with work with the other artists and what we tried to achieve together, I guess that this was another way of challenging this notion of monolithic Mexico, where everything is, like pointing to the same direction. Because, for example, this community with which I work with, they don't speak Spanish. They have a completely different, what we call here usos y costumbres, that means the way of living. And so it was, I think it was very interesting to have this voice in the pavilion and let them speak for themselves through the actual practice of weaving these traditional textiles, but done in a very personal way. So I guess that would be more or less it. I don't know if I explained myself very well, but that was the idea.
Thank you, Santiago. I guess actually it's like a great time to open up for questions from the audience. So like if anyone has a question, please like raise your hand or like speak up. It would be great to hear reactions from the public. And while people gather their thoughts, I have a couple of questions. And well, first of all, like congratulations. I think it's like a really interesting convergence of ideas and perspectives. And but well, like a really practical question, I guess. It's like, why is there like Coca-Cola bottles in Santiago's piece? Like, what is the logic behind that? I can guess, but I would like to hear it from you. And then I have another question for Naomi, but I guess let's Santiago answer that, and then I will go to Naomi.
So actually, I'll go a little bit back to show the picture. So you see two bottles. One is a Coca-Cola bottle, and the other one is another soft soda bottle, but with traditional alcohol called Posh. Posh is made with corn and with sugarcane. And the thing here is that when the evangelical churches started to arrive in Chiapas by the end of the 60s, beginning of the 70s, there was a lot of conversions in those communities, and people changed because alcohol was pretty much part of the religious, traditional religious religion. They had. And so when some of them converted to evangelical churches, they stopped drinking and they started to use Coca-Cola as part of the same kind of ceremonies or rites or whatever. So now, for example, if you go to the church at San Juan Chamula, you will see all these Coca-Cola bottles as part of the different ceremonies. So I use them just to represent this kind of change, because and to represent the body actually, because all these textiles were weaved in a backstrap loom. So what we are missing here is actually the body of the person who weaves. And so the bottles kind of act as kind of a symbolic representation of the body of the weavers. And this change between traditional ways and kind of modern ways, let's say, or because of the conversion, the religious conversion that happened there. So that's why they have those bottles. And I use them also as weights, of course, to stretch the fabric.
Oh, thank you. Rene Gonzalez has a question.
Yes, well, it's a comment first and then a question. Well, just quickly, I thought that the Coca-Colas were referring to the church in San Juan Chamula that is always full of Coca-Colas as ofrendas, but it's interesting. Well, first I wanted to congratulate all the participants because I really thought their work is incredible, and the comments have been so interesting that really I felt like transported to Venice. I have never been, but I mean to this show. But I think the curating and the work and everything is really fascinating. And I will be looking forward for the book because I really think it was fascinating. And the other comment is that I am also very angry with the New York Times because I believe as well that, I mean, you can, of course, you are not attacking Mexico. You are just, being part of Mexico. So I'm glad that you were able to do this. And I am sure that the cultura in Mexico must be as happy as I am with your work. So, and I mean, it's more like comments than questions. The other comment is telling you that I myself studied in Chicago with Professor Katz, and that's why I received the news from you guys, and also because we have a chair at Chicago. I work at the Fulbright Commission in Mexico as a director of programs. I have been here for 8 years. And I wanted to let you know, I mean, all the participants, that Comexus is recovering the cultural exchanges programs. Because when the commission was created like 30 years ago, we did have a cultural exchange program and it disappeared for some reason, which I don't know, but for 20 years, we haven't done a cultural exchange. So I want to let you know that we are starting this year. We are going back to the original essence of Comexus, and we will be doing cultural exchange, meaning taking Mexican artists to the US and bringing artists from the US to Mexico. So I wanted to let you know, and I'm going to write my email here in the chat, because I think that it would be wonderful to collaborate with you in exchanges with different museums or libraries or archives in the US. I also want to let you know that I just spent some time with Mari Carmen Ramirez, who is the curator of the Latin American collection in the Museum of Fine Arts in Houston. She is also an alumna of Chicago and of Professor Katz. So I'll be working with her as well. So I wanted to let you know that and to congratulate you again for your work and for the comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Renee. Well, I think I can jump with my, go ahead, Catalina, please.
No, I just thought that we never really described Fernando's work, so maybe I'll attempt to do that so you get a sense. So Fernando's work is called Tetzahuitl, which in Nahuatl means omen, I guess. I don't know how to translate it, like presagio. And the work is like, I think it has many different layers, and I actually can't grasp all of them. So I will just try to describe what happens when you see the work, because the work has, the work was actually the only work that was not produced specifically for this exhibition. It was a work that Fernando had already done, and he kind of readjust for this exhibition. And it's a work where you, as many of his work is a mechatronic sculpture, which means that it moves, and normally it's active, it's motion activated. So when someone enters the space, it should start, and it's normally like a sequence of movements that he has programmed, where Fernando and his collaborators program. So when you enter the space and the motion starts, there is a sort of choreography of these dresses that are going down and kind of shaking, and then going up and down in different paces, and with different let's say rhythms. There are 43 dresses, so it kind of references the disappearance of the 43 students of Ayotzinapa. And I think it broadly refers to a state of violence that is kind of devastating Mexico in general. It relates to a culture of extractivism and violence in different ways. But then the structure that you see in the ceiling, it also references the coyote and an owl. The coyote is an animal that Fernando identifies with. He's like, our alter ego is the old coyote. So that's something that is very present in his work in general. And then the motion is also related to his own research on kind of shamanic visions and things that I can't fully grasp in their complexity. And there's also another piece that is next to the dresses that is like a coyote making a sort of prayer in front of another coyote. And then, sorry, I'm making a very, very simple and not very sophisticated description of this piece that I know Fernando would describe in much like better ways, but I just wanted to give you a sense. So the pavilion had a lot of movement and a lot of noise, and all those layers were very important, I think. Not only the fact that like Mariana's work was kind of hosting all the other works that were kind of going on top of it, but also the fact that there were many layers of sound, etc. And I think another notion that is quite present for me in the pavilion is the notion of translation, and not necessarily saying that the works translate something into something, but that there is an acknowledgement of translation as a methodology or as a way of trying to mediate between things that you understand and things that you don't understand. And translations are never perfect. So I think this is very important in all the works. None of the works try to explain something to the public or be like they don't provide information about something in particular, but I think they're more like attempts to translate or to problematize the notion of translation. So I think, for instance, the hybridity of Mariana's drawing, or all the characters in Naomi's video, and the Santiago's work with the Tzotzil weavers. They all involve some degree of translation or of attempting translation, and I think that's something important throughout the pavilion. And then I just let you ask your question, Alberto. Sorry.
No, thank you, Catalina. That was great. Yeah, like I had a question for Naomi regarding like her work, in the sense that I'm really interested in like critiques of extractivism, and I see like this trend that, you know, that they tend to attempt to re-enchant nature in order to like contra, like let's say, to go against modernity. But I think like the decision of like creating these gang of vermin who communicate via radio waves, it's really important. Like the idea of radio waves as like a pinnacle of modernity, right? It's like super interesting to me, in which it allows us to reframe that question, that it's not rather that we have to re-enchant nature, but that we can actually disenchant modernity with its own means, right? That there is like the possibility of reframing what we do with technology today and what we have become with it. So I really wanted to just like hear a little bit more on why you chose to, like, let's say, create these mutants in that particular manner. You're muted.
Sorry. Thank you for the question. Actually, the decision to use the radio as another element among the characters, or a connecting element, was because there's a very vivid and vibrant and important political tradition in many towns and cities in Oaxaca, which have to do with the communitarian radio, with independent radio stations, as a way to organize communities. So for me, it was important to point at that, to point at technologies that actually that they activate political capacities and they expand autonomous capacities too. And in that sense, I'm pretty much inspired or influenced by Ivan Illich, who would say that who would talk about the convivial technologies, or the convivial tools and technologies that allow us to recover our autonomous capacities. The problem with modernity is that the overuse of technology has been counterproductive, meaning schooling makes people more stupid or consumers, right? Motorized transportation makes life actually slower in many ways. I mean, you spend lots of time in traffic. The overuse of medicine creates also its own illness. So I'm interested in think about technologies as allies or as tools to expand and to recover the possibility to connect. And my work, even though there's a plot that is, that you can sense that it's lots of violence underneath, it's trying to refuse this grammar of violence, or it's trying not to represent that, and instead it's trying to focus on this possibility of connection, transformation, relationality. And I think that, well, talking about extractivism, I like very much how Rita Laura Segato explains these tendencies of turning life into things, turning the planet into commodities, turning women's bodies into objects, turning basically the vital pulse of life into a commodity. She calls that the command of masculinity. And it's a command that basically is based on control, subordination, very limited bonding, bureaucracy, etc. And there's as a counter pedagogy of this cruelty, counter pedagogy of the cruelty of the mandate of masculinity, which is not against men. It's about patriarchy and the drive to control and subordinate and turn life into property. She proposes this historical project, this historical female project, and not female as an essence, but female as accumulated history of taking care of the bonds and taking care of relationality and taking care of life. And actually, in the defense of land, in many of the struggles for the defense of the territories against extractivist projects, the role of women is super important, is super central, because there's also this historical experience of, cooking for the family, being in charge of the reproductive labor, of the reproduction of life. So, but I think I'm now talking about something else. But I wanted to say that actually there's a quote in the like a secret quote in the work, because one of the arms that is coming up is holding a book that is called Aire No Te Vendas by Griselda Sanchez, who is she's a sound artist, but she's also an anthropologist, I think, who's based in Oaxaca, and who makes a very nice connection between the defense of the air against these wind power energies that are, they are expanding in Istmo, in Tehuantepec, but it's not a green ecology, because actually they are importing the how do you call them, the ventiladores?
Yeah.
I think the mills, I think the windmills, they call them. The thing is that it's not a green economy. They dispossess people from their lands. They create a complete mess. They divide communities, etc. And she talks about, in her book that is called Aire No Te Vendas, she connects the defense of this air with the defense of the Hertzian wave, the radio wave. But not only that, it's also the defense of the voice as something of the sound, something that travels through these waves, right? So what else? So for instance, there are images that are projected in the bat's wings in the video. We can see extractivist projects in her wings, sorry. And you see these wind power energy plants. And the communitarian radios has been crucial in helping out communities to organize themselves politically, to create autonomous ways of explaining what is happening, of sharing relevant information, of expanding different forms of education that go against, the official versions of, these extractivist projects of developmental projects will bring more jobs and more development and more modernity. Actually, they are trying to defend other forms of living that are disconnected from this idea of turning life into property, and instead they're fostering a more interdependent understanding of our existence in relation to the cycles of nature and with nature.
Thank you. That was a brilliant answer.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the artist, the curator? More praise is welcome too.
Mauricio apologizes because his connection failed and I don't know, he couldn't rejoin.
Okay. No worries, Mauricio. I have just to, we are running out of time. We're close to our time limit, but before that, I have a question for Mariana, which I wanted to ask, just to expand a little bit on like your interest in maps or in mapping, because it is like really interesting to like, let's say, to think that the pavilion is like hosted by a map, but it is like a map of possibility. It is not a map that exists, right? Or like it kind of like dwells between different kinds of temporalities. So I just wanted to hear more about like the influence of maps and mapping in your practice.
Yeah, I did other works which were related to mapping. The first floor piece I made, it's based on a document that was painted by an indigenous unknown artist, and it was then converted into a woodcut in Europe, and it was printed in the first letter, or in the second letter that Hernán Cortés sent to the king to convince him that it was a good idea to conquer the American continent. And in the case of the piece I did for the pavilion, it was more like a collage. So I didn't make one topography, but it was more like a complex space. It had also a certain three-dimensionality to it. So it was like the center was, as I said, like a very calendaric figure. And then the rest of the images were all distorted in a kind of escorzo, or in a kind of, in the way that you see images distorted in some ceilings in other architectural spaces. And also some of these images were overlapped. So there were a lot of hearts that had, it comes from an alphabet that was made by Diego de Valadez, who was an indigenous Franciscan monk who spoke different native languages, but was also working for the church. So he had a kind of schizophrenic view on things, and he was trying to convert the Indians. And he makes all these monsters that are like speaking with snakes or speaking with centipedes, or they're a bit like monsters and mutants. So in the case of this space, it's not a single space, but it's more of a complex space that it's made out of different hybrid figures. that come both from historical characters that were embedded in a particular moment and belong to a certain power structure. So in general, maps are power structures because they tell us how to organize a space, how to walk it, how to move within it. And it's the same thing with calendars. Calendars are something that we build in order to understand time and to relate to each other in terms of time. So in this case, it was speaking about the collide of different cosmogonies. So in the case of the Mesoamerican calendar, how it collided with the European calendar and how the European colonizers were trying to fit it or to fix it into their structure. So it was this kind of, by coming back to what Catalina was saying, trying to translate, but to translate in order to convert. So it's basically these power structures that are trying to integrate indigenous knowledges and to add them into their power structure. So I think this is more or less the different thoughts that I had in mind, but I would say that it's not just a map, it's like a kind of a map calendar. It's a mixture between both. And it's also not totally historical, but it's also personal. So I try to make an experiment where there are more elements coming into place. And they're also like small scenes, so people can go through the space between the works of the other artists that many times were overlapping, or there was one flower that was going into Naomi's room and you couldn't even see it, just a little bit, or also the place where Santiago had his textiles. It also refers somehow to architecture, or the coyote was next to these people who were speaking on scorpion. So for me, it was also very nice how the work had a dialogue with the pieces of the other artists that were part of the exhibition. So I really enjoyed it because it made it even more complex and more intriguing somehow.
Thank you for your answer. Y tenemos una última pregunta que la voy a leer en español y sirve que clausuramos en español también. Pregunta René, ¿cómo fue que nombraron la muestra? Si fue una idea de los curadores o cuál fue la lógica detrás de hasta que los cantos broten. Estás en mute, Catalina.
Perdón. Realmente fue una idea de Mauricio. Y estábamos realmente, digamos que ya para irnos al chisme, en México, como en muchos otros lugares, se pide el proyecto para el pabellón con muy poco tiempo y tuvimos muy poco tiempo para prepararlo. Y estábamos como desesperados, como pensando en títulos y los dos como mirando cosas que a mí es una de las cosas que más me cuestan trabajo. Y en eso, pues Mauricio se le ocurrió, es como una variación de un poema, digamos que fue escrito más o menos en el momento de la conquista de México. Ay, que ahora se me fue el nombre del poeta. ¿Alguno se acuerda? En este momento bueno, era un poeta nahua que además era, pues, digamos que lo pongo en palabras en español porque no sé cómo se diría, pero era como un alto mando del ejército que estaba defendiendo Tenochtitlan, era cercano a Cuauhtémoc, en fin, y era poeta y escribe este poema que vamos a incluir en el libro del pabellón, y un poco para nosotros era como esta idea, tenía como este carácter reivindicativo de cómo seguir luchando o seguir resistiendo hasta que los cantos broten, ¿no? Algo así. Entonces, cuando Mauricio me lo propuso, a mí me gustó bastante la idea y que hubiera salido un poco así como sin tratar de teorizarlo o articularlo demasiado respecto a alguna noción específica, sino que fuera como más un guiño a este poema. No, perdón, me da mucha vergüenza no acordarme del nombre, pero no me acuerdo.
No es ahí lo pusieron.
Temilotzin, eso, gracias,
Temilotzin.
pero perdón,
Gracias,
la
Jacob.
verdad es que siento como si la Bienal hubiera sido hace 3 años, aunque fue aunque estábamos inaugurando en abril, pero bueno, el título surgió un poco de ahí, pero como digo, no fue como digamos, fue bastante rápido que surgió y surgió un poco como un guiño a esa literatura que nos llega, pues que nosotros podemos leer traducida, aunque en el catálogo sí estamos poniendo la versión náhuatl, español e inglés.
Mil gracias. Se nos acabó el tiempo y quiero agradecer a todos por estar acá con nosotros. Mil gracias por representar a México de esta manera. Muchas gracias por el trabajo que hicieron. Y a todos los asistentes, esta fue la última sesión del cuatrimestre de otoño en el Katz Center for Mexican Studies y nos vemos a la siguiente.